Hello aspirants, very good morning to all of you. So friends, anthropological thought and theories is always a fascinating aspect in anthropology. So if we speak particularly from the perspective of UPSC Civil Services Examination, definitely we can expect more than around 60 to 75 marks from paper 1 in anthropological theories and thought section. So we have to master this particular unit, that is unit number 6. So friends, from today onwards, let's try to have a small series where we can just cover most of the important anthropological theories from anthropological point of view. So on that note, from today, let us try to understand the concept that is classical evolutionism. So our major question today would be to understand what is classical evolutionism and what are the basic premises of classical evolutionism, and then who are the important pioneer proponents of the classical evolutionism, and then let us try to explore more about some of important accomplishments and criticism associated with the classical evolutionism. So that would be our major quest. So without wasting much of time, let us begin the discussion. So first and foremost thing, so if you look from the perspective of classical evolutionism, so friends, before to that we have to understand some basic aspect that what is evolution. So this is very, very important for us to understand. So if you see from the perspective of the basic meaning of the word evolution, so in simple fashion, evolution is nothing but it's a process of gradual change and a kind of progressive change in something. So it is nothing but it's a kind of gradual and progressive change. So we are using the word gradual and progressive, two important things that you have to remember, where be it could be the matter, be it could be the process, be it could be anything, it moves from a direction that is nothing but always in the evolution, things will evolve from simple to complex and from indefinite to definite mode. And incoherence to coherence. So this is what the basically direction of the evolution. So in simple fashion to say, the evolution is nothing but it's a process, so which includes gradual and progressive change in something. So here we are saying from the perspective of, if you say from the perspective of different aspects of this. So if we try to explore about the concept of gradual and progressive change in the concept of the biological origin of humans. Biological origin of humans. So here we will be systematically dealing with the concept of biological evolution. Biological evolution. So then, if we are systematically studying about the concept of gradual and progressive change with respect to the society and culture, that means various socio-cultural institutions, so then we'll be dealing with something that is known as cultural evolution. Cultural evolution. So evolution usually extends or it will be there from both the spheres, that is from biological sphere as well as cultural sphere. So our major quest in today's discussion is that we are discussing with respect to the cultural evolution. So if we see from the perspective of the cultural evolution, so in the realm of anthropology, the systematic study of cultural evolution, or in fact anthropology has been begun from the 19th century onwards. So where a set of scholars have tried to explain the evolution of various socio-cultural institutions in a systematic fashion. So since then, we have got one important school of anthropology has been developed. That important school of anthropology is nothing but it is the evolutionary school of thought. Evolutionary school of thought in anthropology. So this is one important thing. So if you see from the perspective of the evolutionary school of thought again, so there were two important branches. So two important sub-schools under this evolutionary school of thought. So where one school of anthropology has been developed by the 19th century scholars. And another group have pitched their propositions and it has been developed by 20th century scholars. So the evolutionary school of thought, which has been developed by the 19th century scholars, they have taken up a basic proposition where they have said that culture everywhere, it evolves in a single sequence from savagery through barbarism through to civilization. So they proposed something that is known as unilineal evolution. That means evolution is always moves in a single line. So that is one thing. So you can remember. So this type of evolutionism has came to be known or called as classical evolutionism. Classical evolutionism. So this you have to remember. Then there were other set of scholars belonging to 20th century who tried to address some of the drawbacks or limitations that are there with the classical evolutionism. So that school has proposed some of the important concepts, like it focused on multilinear evolution of the culture. So this school has came to known as neo-evolutionism. Neo-evolutionism. So this background you must have to have before we proceed with the concept of classical evolutionism. So that's what the background. So this is in simple fashion to say this is the background of the concept. So you have to understand. So with this understanding, now let us try to explore more into the concept of classical evolutionism. So first, let us try to see the classical evolutionism. So when we see from the perspective of classical evolutionism, so some of the important aspects that you have to remember here is that the classical evolutionism has been simultaneously developed in three important places. So one school which has been developed in the Britain, that is known as Britain School of Classical Evolutionism. So and other school which has been developed in America is known as American School of Classical Evolutionism. And simultaneously, so in Germany also we have got, so German School of Classical Evolutionism. So in all these three nations, in Britain, in America, as well as in Germany, so classical evolutionism has been parallelly evolved. So when did it evolve? So it has been evolved in the 19th century. So the period is 19th century. And the places were all these things. So if you systematically see from the perspective of the Britain School, so in Britain School, some of the important pioneer anthropologists that were associated were nothing but, first we should talk about E.B. Tylor. So E.B. Tylor is nothing but the Bernard Tylor, so who is also famously regarded as the father of cultural anthropology for his immense contributions. So then we have R. Marett. So he is another important classical evolutionist belonging to the Breton school of classical evolutionism. And then if you see from the perspective of other scholar, so Sir James Fraser. So one most important influential classical evolutionist we must and should read. So that's one. Then if you see from the American school of anthropology point of view, so we have our Louis Henry Morgan. So L.H. Morgan is a pioneer American anthropologist belonging to classical evolutionism. Then in German school, so we have J. Bachofen, and then we have Adolf Bastian. So these are nothing but important pioneer anthropologists. They are associated with the classical evolutionism. So if you see from the perspective of the classical evolutionism, so what they propose is that, so all of them, they proposed one basic proposition. What was that basic proposition which all of them have together said to us is that culture everywhere has been developed in a similar fashion. So it always has passed on, culture passes in these stages. So culture always develops from savagery, it passes through barbarism, and from barbarism it evolves into civilization. So this is what the basic proposition that all these classical evolutionists have said. So they have said that culture everywhere evolves in a single sequence from savagery through barbarism to civilization. So for this, to explain this, so they have given some basic premises. So now let us try to understand what are the important basic premises told are given by the classical evolutionism. So what are the basic premises or what are the basic tenets? So if you see from the perspective of the basic tenets, so one important tenet is nothing but it talks from the perspective of the concept unilinearity. Unilinearity is one important basic tenet. So what do you mean by unilinearity? Unilinearity here basically refers to the concept that development of something or evolution of something in a single sequence or in a single sequence. So uni means single, linearity means line. So what they have said, so always culture evolves in a single sequence or in a single line. So how? So from savagery it passes through barbarism, then it moves through, evolves to civilization. So this is what they have first basic premise. Okay, then next important premise that they have given to us is that culture always evolves in a rectilinear fashion. So rectilinearity is another important aspect. So what is this rectilinearity? So when we say from the perspective of the rectilinearity, so try to understand this clearly. So they have said that culture always evolves in upward and onward direction. Upward and onward direction. That means they were intended to say as that culture always evolves in a single direction. So how, in what direction we are saying that upward and onward direction. So what is that direction? So at the bottom always we will have this savagery, which is characterized by very primitive forms of life. So let's say for example, hunting and gathering type of life would be there in savagery. So then from this, at the bottom we always will have savagery. Then it moves in upward and onward direction where we move towards the barbarism kind of stage of evolution. Then from this stage, this barbarism stage could be characterized by some of the characters like domestication of animals, pastoralism, or like agriculture. So all those aspects would be part and parcel of the barbarism. And then it moves to the next and higher level, that is civilization. So this is the next stage. So at the bottom we will have savagery, at the top we will have civilization. So in this fashion, culture always moves in the upward and onward direction. So that is what this particular premise says. Then next important premise is that culture is, although it is iso-sequential and iso-directional, but it is not iso-rate. That means culture always will have a differential rate of evolution. So this is one another premise. So differential rate of evolution. So evolution, culture will have differential rate of evolution. So it is not, that means not iso rate. So that means some cultures will evolve very quickly, some cultures will evolve very slowly. Some cultures will experience the savagery phase for a lot of days, a lot of years, and then some cultures will evolve, will experience the savagery for very less period. So rate is very, is not uniform, or that's one thing. So then that is one important premise. Then if you see other important premise, so culture, when it is passing on through the stages, there is possibility that the skipping of stages So what is the skipping of stages? So there is every possibility that in some cultures they may skip the one stage and they may jump to other stages. Let's say for example, if a society is experiencing the savage form of culture, it may skip the barbarism and jump to civilization if the conditions helps. So that means directly, like let's say for example, it may move from savagery to, simply to say, civilization by skipping the barbarism phase. So it will not be there. So that is one another important thing. So this is another important premise. Now we are saying that culture has been evolved everywhere in the single sequence, in the single direction, with the differential rate of evolution and all those things. How did it happen? So let's say for example, why this kind of things will happen. So why culture evolves everywhere in a single direction and in a single sequence from the savagery to barbarism to civilization? This is the major quest so that they have encountered. For this, they have given one important premise and one important condition which states that, which is nothing but the concept of psychic unity of mankind. Psychic unity of mankind. So this is one important thing that we have to understand from the perspective of the classical evolutionism. So what is psychic unity of mankind? So it's a condition which states that human beings will basically share a similar basic mental framework. So where human mind always thinks in a similar fashion, in a similar environmental condition. So let's understand this with an example. Let's say for example, when human being felt cold, so he tried to cover up his body. So that's one thing. So everywhere human mind will think like this. So let's say for example, when he was just heating raw meat. So accidentally he invented fire. So everywhere this has happened. So it has happened in Africa, it has happened in America, it has happened in Asia, so everywhere. So that means human mind, when provided in similar environmental conditions, will try to think in a similar way. So that concept is known as psychic unity of mankind. That's why culture everywhere has been evolved in these sequences. So that is what the particular aspect says. Is that clear for you? Now, so these are nothing but important premises of the classical evolutionism. So try to just have a look at once. So basic premises of classical evolutionism includes: first thing, unilinearity; second thing, rectilinearity; third thing, differential rate of evolution; fourth thing, that is skipping of stages; and the fifth thing, that is psychic unity of mankind. So you must and should understand and learn these things. So that is one important aspect. So now, what about the methodology used by the classical evolutionists? So if you see from the perspective of the classical evolutionism, so they have used one important method that is known as historic method, or it is also known by another name, that is the comparative method. So what is this historic method or comparative method? So what they have done, so most of the classical evolutionists were armchair anthropologists. So what do you mean by armchair anthropologists? That means they have just refrained themselves to the their offices, and they were sitting in their homes, and they were trying to just explain all this theory. So with the help of the ethnographic data that has been provided by other scholars. So that's why we will call them as armchair anthropologists. So what they have done, so they have systematically compared different cultures, and they have evolved a particular way of the sequence of evolution of culture. So that's why it is known as the comparative method. Okay, so it is also known as the historic method. What is this historic method? They have relied on a technique or method where they try to reconstruct the past cultures by using the contemporary primitive cultures. So what they have done, so they have relied on contemporary primitive cultures. Contemporary primitive cultures, because primitive cultures, so we cannot go back to the prehistoric times. So the better example is like selecting the primitive cultures which are available in today's. So after selecting these contemporary primitive cultures, so they try to reconstruct the past historical cultures. Past historical cultures. So this was the methodology that they have been used. So in fact, the comparative method or the historic method has been systematically developed with the efforts of the scholar E.B. Tylor. E.B. Tylor was very instrumental in developing this method. So that is one thing that you have to remember. Is that it clear? So this is nothing but the methodology used by the classical evolutionists. So try to just recollect. So who were all the pioneer anthropologists here? And then try to just check and try to just have a glance of the basic premises. And the methodology is nothing but basically comparative method or the historic method. So then what about the accomplishments? So if you see from the perspective of accomplishments, so in the year 1884, so anthropology has been systematically evolved as a separate discipline in Oxford University. That is one important accomplishment. And then apart from this, so they have significantly contributed in successfully giving some evolutionary scheme of various socio-cultural institutions. So where we can see some of the important evolutionary schemes. So where if you see from the perspective of various socio-cultural institutions. So what we can say first, if you see from the perspective of the marriage as a social institution. So marriage as a social institution has been evolved from a very prehistoric times. So what was the basic need of it? So to regulate and control the sexual behavior of the human beings. So that's what the important aspect of marriage. So like once there was a kind of sexual promiscuity. So where there were no particular regulations with respect to maintaining sexual relations. So from there, so the marriage has been evolved to the next stage, that is the group marriage. It is known as the group marriage practice. So from group marriage, it moved on to polygamy. So where one person having multiple spouses. So that was one thing. Then if you see from polygamy, so the most advanced and civilized form is monogamy, with one person having one single spouse. So that is monogamy. So that's how it evolved. So if you see from the perspective of families, so again, so what they have said. So families has been evolved from matrilineal, that means matrilineal families, to patrilineal families. Patrilineal families. This is how the family as a socio-cultural institution has been evolved. So there, further if you see, so family has been further evolved in matriarchal nature to patriarchal families. So this is the evolutionary scheme of family. So that's one thing. So in the similar fashion, if you see from the perspective of something that is religion, so from different scholars have further pitched different type of evolutionary scheme. So where we have our E.B. Tylor, and we have our R.R. Marett. Do you remember R.R. Marett? And we have James Fraser. So classical evolutionists, Sir James Fraser, very, very important scholar. So according to E.B. Tylor, religion has been evolved, and the most primitive form of religion was animism. So from animism, then we started believing in multiple gods. So that is known as polytheism. And from there we started following or worshipping single god, monotheism. This is the evolutionary sequence of religion. So then, if you see from R.R. Marett's point of view, so R.R. Marett has introduced animatism, one new concept. So animatism, we started moving towards polytheism, and from here we have moved towards monotheism. So this is what, according to R.R. Marett, so a British anthropologist. So then James Fraser, so he says that magic evolved into religion, and further this religion has led to evolution of something called as science. So this is what the evolutionary scheme of various socio-cultural institutions. So that's one thing you have to remember. So this is also another significant contribution and achievement of the classical evolutionists. So like that we had different accomplishments of the classical evolutionism. So then if you see from the perspective of drawbacks, So some of the important drawbacks are that, so this particular school of thought, it largely relies on one of the important components that is known as psychic unity of mankind. So the concept of psychic unity of mankind is a questionable aspect because there is no empirical evidence to prove that human mind always thinks in a similar fashion. So that's one thing. Then they have relied on the comparative method or historical method. Do you remember that? So this is a crude method and inherently which is a defective aspect. So how can we reconstruct the past culture with the help of present cultures? So present culture could be different and past cultures could be different, but they have relied on the comparative method or the historical reconstruction with the help of the contemporary primitive cultures. So that's what they have done. So this is also one thing. And then they were just armchair anthropologists. They have excessively, they have mostly relied on the secondary data, that is the ethnographic data that has been developed by other scholars. So their data was not primary data, not first-hand data. This is another important, important criticism. And then, like, they have just relied only on the unilinearity of the evolution. But there were some other scholars who just argued that the culture can also evolve in the multi-directional or multi-sequential manner. So that's the task of the neo-evolutionary school of thought, whom they have pitched and addressed the neo-evolutionism. So friends, this is what with respect to the classical evolutionism. So whenever you are just trying to write about the classical evolutionism, you should write systematically one introduction. So where the introduction should consist of some important aspects, like classical evolutionism is also known as the 19th century evolutionism, or it is unilinear evolutionism. So you have to mention who are the important pioneer anthropologists and what is the basic proposition of them. So these are the things that you have to write in introduction. Then you have to mention about the basic premises. So then you have to explain and mention about the methodology. Then you should proceed towards the accomplishments as well as the criticism. This is how you have to write. So there you can take up a question and you can write. So discuss the basic premises. Discuss the basic premises of classical evolutionism. Classical evolutionism. So you can write it for 15 marker question. So this is the assignment for you. So try to just answer this particular question and you can just upload your comments also. So in your comment section also you can mention what are the basic premises of classical evolutionism, so that like I can check to what extent you have understood our discussion. So that's what I wanted to share and discuss with you for today. So friends, let's meet in another important discussion with another important topic. So till then, keep revising all the important topics. So that is the key concepts of anthropology. So it's me, your Dr. Suresh Guramkonda, signing off, and thank you all for watching the video.